Hey, it's Dr. Rupi from the Doctor's Kitchen, and I'm doing a monthly Q&A with you guys. My team have collated a massive list of questions from both Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. As I said, we're going to be doing this monthly, so just send your questions and I'll try and get through as many as I can, but there's literally like tons here. Can IBD patients ask for colorectal cancer screening due to higher risk? Would you recommend a no red meat diet? So inflammatory bowel disease, very complicated, very common issue that we've talked about at length on the podcast. So please go check out the one I've done with Alan Desmond. He's a brilliant source of knowledge. The evidence demonstrates that a whole food plant-based diet, so that's one that again contains lots of colors, lots of different types of fiber, plenty of good quality fats, is actually beneficial and may reduce CRP and other measures of inflammation markers that we have that could benefit inflammatory bowel disease patients. So please listen to that podcast. It's got a lot of really detailed studies, and I've linked to some of those studies as well in the show notes on thedoctorskitchen.com. One thing to note is that there was a study that came out of Scripps University using an autoimmune protocol diet, one that removed things like dairy and grains and gluten, and they actually demonstrated improvements. So that isn't to say that everyone needs to remove gluten and dairy from their diet. It's to say there is some interesting research to demonstrate that when we simplify our diet, we focus on lots of plants, you increase your fiber, at an individual level, you can have some benefits. No red meat. I think red meat definitely does have some benefits to people's diets, particularly those who are lacking in iron, but there are lots of other plant-based sources of iron as well. So beans, nuts, legumes, and some other novel products as well. But I would certainly limit red meat if you choose to eat red meat in anyone generally, but particularly if you do suffer from inflammatory bowel disease, which can be triggered by red meat. Okay, another one. My husband is AF like yourself and is now vegan. Any diet tips as he takes no medication? Well, if he doesn't need any medication, that's great. Atrial fibrillation is something that I used to suffer from. If you listen to podcast 1, I talk about my own story, and in the introduction section to my first book, The Doctor's Kitchen. Atrial fibrillation is a complicated condition, one that has many triggers. For some people, it's things like alcohol, stress. For some people, there's a physical issue with the actual structure of the heart itself, which leads to something called a re-entry pathway. There's not that much research in terms of nutrition and atrial fibrillation. There is one paper that I've come across where they implemented a weight loss regime, omega-3 fatty acid supplementation, and a multivitamin that actually made sure that everyone had good adequate amounts of B vitamins and vitamin E. That, I think, is the only evidence that we have for atrial fibrillation. But personally, what I believe to have improved my atrial fibrillation episodes to the point where I don't have any anymore were a stress-free lifestyle, where I actually engaged in yoga, flow, and meditation. So my stress came right down. A largely plant-based diet, lots of greens in particular. The greens I'm talking about are cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, rocket, kale, cabbage, and one that actually contained a lot of good quality fats as well. And I do take an omega-3 supplement as well to top myself up. So I hope that answers your question, but please do speak to your cardiologist. Everyone's an individual, and some people may need to take medications. I think we need to be appreciative of the fact that pharmaceuticals are there to help us, and we need to use them responsibly alongside our lifestyle elements as well. This is going to be a long video. Okay. Hey, no question, but just wanted to stop by and say you rock. Oh, thank you very much. Upbeat Fitness Online. That's very nice of you. What is the best to eat for hair growth? So I'm going to be doing a podcast on this very soon. In general, the best thing for eating for hair, I believe, is vitamin E and vitamin A containing foods, and the things that you find those in are nuts and seeds. I think there may be something to do with, as with everything in life, the microbiota, so the microbes that live largely in your gut, may actually be impactful on hair growth as well. There are a number of reasons why people have issues with hair growth. So this isn't a quick answer of like, just take vitamins A, E, and zinc and magnesium and your hair is going to grow like, mine.
Too sexy for my, too sexy for my, too sexy for my. I'm a model.
There is going to be a podcast coming very soon, and we're going to be chatting about that topic, so stay tuned for that one. Food poisoning, what to do whilst trying to recover. So food poisoning I see very often in A&E. The simplest thing is to make sure you've chatted to a medical professional, because there are some types of food poisoning that can lead to quite drastic issues where you become dehydrated, there's inflammation of your gut. If there's blood in the stool or anything like that, you definitely need to have a chat with your medical professional. If it's regular food poisoning, that is from norovirus, or you got it from kids or contact with anyone else that's been ill in a non-severe manner, the best thing is to first of all ask yourself, are you immunocompromised? So is this an issue that could impact your medical condition? If you're generally fit and healthy, the main things are hydration, so making sure you're having things like salt and sugar replacement drinks like Diarrhea as my go-to, and very, very simple foods, no animal products, no dairy, no heavy vegetables as well, and that's very odd for me to say, but you just want to be having dry foods in the early instances whilst your stomach is trying to get over the insult of food poisoning. Even something like dry bread or toast or plain rice, that's all I would advise in the early stages, and then gradually increase the complexity of your food as you get over the illness as well. What is the best thing for early arthritis? Again, this is something that I'm going to be chatting on a podcast. The main supplements are omega-3, and there's another one called, I always forget the name of it. It begins with a...
Starts with an S. So swummy, slippy, slappy, slimming, Swanson?
Maybe it's on the briefcase. Look on the...
Oh yeah, it's right here. Samsonite. I was way off.
Costochondritum. That's one of the supplements you can have. The other thing is an anti-inflammatory diet. So looking for sources of sugar in your food, any refined carbohydrates. You want to make sure you're increasing your consumption of dark green leafy vegetables that we know are anti-inflammatory, but also having good quality fatty acids. That comes from nuts and seeds, and also omega-3 fats in the form of fish or algae. I think is a really good addition for people. There are lots of different types of arthritides. There's inflammatory arthritis, and there's like regular sort of physical manifestations of arthritis where you get bone-on-bone contact. Again, something I need to do a full podcast on, but I think in general, when you increase the nutrient density of your diet, you have a lot more polyphenols in there, you look after your gut, you'd be surprised at the anti-inflammatory effects of that, to the point where you can actually delay the need for more extreme measures like surgery and other stronger pain-killing methods. The main thing I would say is actually making sure that you're of an optimum weight for you, because we know that that's directly correlated with worse outcomes. So if you are overweight and speaking to your health practitioner about ways in which you can improve your weight, by just focusing on wellness and focusing on optimizing your diet, the weight will slip off as well. I tend not to talk about weight loss that much because I think it's kind of a redundant point. You don't want to make things arbitrary. You want to focus on wellness and feeling well in yourself. And I've come across patients that have improved their diet, and regardless of any weight loss, they've improved their symptoms. So think about nutrient density of your food. And there's a really good account by a patient called Arthritis Foodie, definitely worth to follow. She talks a lot about how she improved her diet. She has a type of inflammatory arthritis, I believe, so it might not be relevant for everyone with degenerative arthritis, but it's definitely useful. Are there any specific diet tips for reversing fibromyalgia? So first of all, fibromyalgia is quite a complicated condition, one that's characterized by pain, fatigue. The mechanism behind it isn't very well researched, and it isn't very well recognized either. It's more of a diagnosis of exclusion once we've excluded a number of different red flag symptoms that could point to things like a growth or something like an autoimmune condition like lupus. I think there are a number of different reasons as to why someone might suffer with symptoms of fibromyalgia. There's a lot of deep-seated emotional issues. Yes, some dietary things that we can optimize to improve symptoms. Nothing's going to really reverse fibromyalgia. I think it's something once you've hit the threshold for, depending on who you are as an individual, it can present in many different ways. So the first thing I would say is, yes, there are ways in which we can optimize our diet for certain people. Inflammation foods, it's something that we talk about a lot. Inflammation is one of the most important processes for your body, but one of the least well recognized. And it's not the inflammation itself, it's the excess of inflammation. It's something that I really want people to understand. It's not inflammation, it's the excess of inflammation. Excess inflammation from foods come from a high refined carbohydrate diet, so things like cakes, biscuits, pastries, high sugar added foods, so things that you get in convenience stores and convenience products like takeaways, microwavable meals, and obviously the obvious things like sweets, candy bars, chocolate bars, all that kind of stuff. Poor sleep is another thing that directly contributes to inflammation that we can measure in our blood, as well as lack of exercise. Exercise itself is an inflammation producing activity, but the net result over long periods of time is actually reduced inflammation. So specifically for fibromyalgia patients, what I like to identify if there are any foods that may be triggering certain things. So that involves doing a 7-day food diary, looking for what their diet actually looks like, and trying to remove any potential issues that could be worsening their symptoms. And you will find that out the more you do it. And the best thing to do is work with a practitioner, whether that be your general practitioner or registered nutritionist or dietitian. The emotional stuff, which I think is quite a difficult topic for a lot of people to even approach, takes a lot of work. You know, even the ability to talk about it openly, things that you might not be even aware of until you actually start talking to someone about what your past was, what your day-to-day life is like, what things that might have been in your history that could have triggered when your symptoms came about. And that's why something I always do is do a timeline of events of when your symptoms started, when you first noted issues, when you last felt well. That's a really, really good question to ask yourself. When was the last time you felt well? Was it as far back as your teens? Was it in your 20s? Was it later on? When did you last feel well? And then you can try to piece together what might be the potential triggers and the root cause of where your issues is. It's a very complicated subject, as you can imagine. I could talk about this honestly for like hours, but specifically dietary wise, just to summarize, it's high refined sugars, it's the inflammation producing foods, and what you want to try and get into your diet: lots of fiber, lots of colors, particularly greens that we know are anti-inflammatory, and good sources of fats like omega-3 fatty acids. I'm a big fan of omega-3 fatty acids that you get from oily fish and algae sources if you're vegetarian or vegan. And the nuts and seeds, they have a short chain omega-3 fatty acid profile. They don't convert to the long chain, but they're still very useful as well. That is a very long answer to a very complicated question. So, and I've got like 100 odd questions to go for. So let's carry on. Do digestive enzyme supplements really work? Only if you have an issue with pancreatic enzyme production. I believe if you've had gallbladder removal, there might be some use for it. Generally, dietitians tend not to use them unless there's a clinical need. So I tend not to use any sort of enzyme supplementation unless I think there's actual use for it. What are good anti-inflammatory foods? We've already talked about that. Does cooking with wine have the same bad effects as drinking it? Probably not. You're cooking off a lot of the alcohol, so I don't think you need to worry about that. Obviously, if it's against your religion for whatever reason, you don't want to be cooking with wine. But in essence, no, it doesn't have the same effect. So if you would put a bottle of red wine in your bourguignon, it's not the same as drinking a bottle of red wine. Not that you'd want to eat a whole bourguignon yourself anyway. Can you tell us about the coronavirus? Well, by the time this video goes out, I'm hoping that we're going to be over it. But if you want to learn more about the coronavirus, the BBC News website, Coronavirus, will tell you everything that you wanted to know about coronavirus in a very approachable manner. What type of virus it is a specific type of virus that is animal to human and now human to human transmission, which is why it's so scary. But overall, if you think about the number of people who die from seasonal flu versus the coronavirus as it is at the moment, I think the death toll is around 200. Any loss of life is something to be mourned, but there are literally thousands of people that die from regular flu every single year. Actually, what we want to be more worried about is not getting flu, particularly if you're vulnerable as well. What is the masters that I'm studying? Nutritional medicine at the University of Surrey. I've done a whole video on nutrition for medics, so if you want to learn a bit more about what kind of resources there are out there for people who are interested in nutrition as a subject, check out that video. And then culinary medicine as well is something that I started as a non-profit, and we're getting into medical schools, and we're teaching people about how to elevate the conversation around food and medicine. So meat, vegetarian, vegans, what are your thoughts on the Netflix documentary? So I tend not to allow myself to get dragged into arguments for or against different documentaries on Netflix, whether we're talking about What the Health or Forks Over Knives or Game Changers. I think I know what this is about. It's probably about Game Changers, which again I'm going to have to do another YouTube video on, because I think there's definitely pros and cons. But my conclusion is that the number of patients that I've come across who've watched the Game Changers, and instead of it being a quote-unquote negative outcome, they've actually rethought about their diet and thought, I don't actually need that much meat in my diet, and I probably do eat too much meat. So I'm going to eat more plants. I'm going to eat more of the beans and lentils and all the kind of stuff that they talked about. That's amazing. I mean, that sort of motivation, that behavior change is unfounded, and the number of times that I've had one-on-one conversations with patients doing that at scale is pretty amazing. What I don't agree with is the scaremongering around meat, and there was a little bit of that in the movie, but I think it's very hard to make a documentary or any production without having some element of sensationalism in it to make it such that I'm talking about this on my YouTube channel and I'm getting comments about it as well. So I think overall the net is a positive. I think it's actually helped make people more aware of the need for more plants in their diet, which is always going to be a good thing. My gut reacts strongly to pulses and legumes. Is there a way to train the gut to start tolerating them? I think it's a really good point. Often people who have had a refined carbohydrate diet or a Western diet, and you suddenly have lentils and pulses in, and your gut's like, what the hell are you doing? What is all this food? What you want to be doing when you're transitioning to a more healthy diet is actually coaxing it in, because your microbes respond to the types of food that you've been introducing into your gut over weeks, years, and it takes a little while to change. What's amazing about your gut microbes is that they can change rapidly, but that still takes a while. So my advice is actually to go slow when introducing different sources of fibers, particularly beans, lentils, and legumes into your diet. So maybe having half a portion, that might be half a cup or 40 grams of lentils in your diet, and adding a whole bunch of different more digestible foods like broccoli or simple greens or other sort of coloured vegetables before you start piling on the lentils and other sorts of high fibre ingredients. One thing is, yes, go slow. The second thing is, when you're consuming lentils, particularly if you're cooking them from scratch, make sure you soak them and you cook them adequately. Inadequately cooked lentils, beans and pulses contain high amounts of anti-nutrients. That sounds very scary, but actually they're beneficial for us in the right amounts. So cooking them properly reduces the anti-nutrients, that actually has net benefits to you as well. Third thing is cooking them with carnative spices. So fennel, cumin, nigella seeds, fantastic for helping your digestion of pulses. They're anti-flatulent. Basically helps with the bloating that you might get when your microbes are consuming them like crazy. The other thing is, you need to be aware of IBS symptoms that would respond to a low FODMAP diet. Again, I'll do another video on that, but essentially you want to be aware if you're a little bit intolerant to them, but you can actually improve your tolerance of them over time by doing a low FODMAP diet for a couple of months and then reintroducing. It's very important to reintroduce. Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts on hypothyroidism. I take prescribed medication. Should I be careful about the amounts of iodine and soy products? I've recently started eating a more plant-based diet. I think thyroidism is a very important subject, and I've steered clear of it recently because I think I need to educate myself more on the issues around thyroid health. It's a complicated topic, but I'm definitely going to approach it. Overall, I don't think there's enough evidence to steer clear of good quality soy products and their phytoestrogens. They have weak phytoestrogenic properties. I need to get better at saying that. And I would say I need to educate myself more on it. I think there's a lot of scaremongering around certain products, but for certain people, there are definitely dietary regimes that can help with hypothyroidism. A clue to that, as far as I'm aware, is it all starts in the gut. And so we'll be talking about that on a podcast very soon, so watch out for that. The last question about rice. I do not eat rice anymore, even if it's from famous USA companies that make organic rice. A month ago, I soaked organic brown rice for 22 hours. After that, I saw a rainbow of colors. I think the soil where the rice was planted had some chemicals in it. I still cooked that rice and ate for 5 days. I could not sleep for 5 nights. Oh wow. Threw away the rice. I still think rice is high in demand. What is your opinion on eating rice, black, red, or brown? By the way, I feel much better without eating rice. And I've lost weight. If you feel better not eating rice, then all power to you, brother, because it's very hard for anyone to sit here and just say, yeah, rice is great for everyone. Everyone needs to be eating rice. If you find a personal issue with rice, don't eat rice. There's plenty of other whole grain products out there that are absolutely incredible. And yes, depending on where you source the product from, will have an impact on whether you react to it, as well as whether that's something that you actually want to consume as well. I personally eat a variety of different whole grains, including rice. I think generally that's something that's lacking in the Western diet, and overall at a population level, we could probably do with eating more brown and black rice, which are fantastic for a number of different benefits. You will see different colors when you soak black rice in particular because of the pigment that's in it, and it causes that rainbow effect. It's not an indication of any sort of worrying chemicals that you can find. However, there are some studies that demonstrate high levels of arsenic in certain types of rice that have been imported. It's quite hard to say for sure whether we should be completely staying clear of certain types of rice. Overall, I think it's a good addition to your diet. The one thing I would say about rice is that you do need to wash, soak it, and properly cook it, for the same reasons why you'd want to do the same for legumes and beans and pulses, because you do want to make sure that you're reducing any anti-nutrient chemicals that in high amounts can be harmful, but in the right amounts can actually be beneficial. It's this therapeutic window for chemicals that you find in rice and other products as well. So I personally eat rice. If you don't like rice, or you find that it's helping you with your weight goals, then that's amazing, and you should carry on with that. And there are plenty of other things that you can eat. That's all I have for my Q&A. I've literally so many questions. I'm going to try and do this at least once a month. So if you do want me to answer any questions, just send us the questions. We'll put a call out across all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Follow us on all those platforms, and we'll try and get your questions out. For now, thank you so much for supporting me on the journey, and my passion is really about trying to give evidence-based information that will help you on your fitness and health and wellness goals, and I will see you here next time. Thank you so much for watching this video. There's so many others for you to enjoy right here. Check out thedoctorskitchen.com, sign up to the newsletter where I give science-based recipes every single week. There's a podcast, there's 2 books, there's loads more content on social media, doctors_kitchen, and I hope to see you there.